The research station hung in the delicate embrace of the Andromeda Archival Nebula, a shimmering construct of crystalline data cores and quantum computing arrays. Dr. Elena Rodriguez adjusted her neural interface, watching as holographic displays materialized around her workspace like intricate, luminescent spider webs. 12 years of research had led her to this moment. 12 years of chasing whispers, of collecting fragments of stories that powerful entities across the galaxy wanted to remain buried. The station itself was a marvel of human engineering, autonomous, nearly invisible to conventional scanning technologies, and powered by a quantum singularity no larger than a human fist. Her latest acquisition sat in the central data matrix, a collection of fragmented communications that most researchers would have dismissed as random noise. But Elena saw patterns where others saw chaos. Each fragment was a puzzle piece, and she was determined to reveal the hidden image. The station's artificial intelligence, an advanced system she had personally designed, hummed softly. Preliminary analysis complete, it announced in a neutral tone that carried subtle undertones of anticipation. Anomalies detected in cross-referenced galactic historical records. Elena leaned forward, her dark eyes reflecting the cascade of holographic data. She was not a typical researcher. Born to a family of diplomatic historians, she had grown up understanding that the most important stories were often those left unspoken. Her grandmother, a veteran diplomatic negotiator, had always told her that silence was its own form of communication. The research grant had come with unusual conditions. The Galactic Historical Consortium rarely funded projects that delved too deeply into certain periods of interspecies interactions. Most researchers would have been deterred by the bureaucratic obstacles, the subtle warnings, the implied threats. But Elena was not most researchers. She remembered the day the grant approval arrived. The holographic message had been encrypted with layers of security that would have challenged most computational systems. But her custom decryption protocols, developed during her doctoral research, peeled back the layers with surgical precision. The message was brief, cryptic, unusual. Some doors, once opened, cannot be closed. Most would have seen it as a warning. Elena saw it as an invitation. The data fragments before her represented more than just historical records. They were echoes of encounters that the galaxy's most powerful species wanted to forget. Moments of first contact that defied conventional understanding. Interactions that seemed to challenge the very fabric of interspecies relationships. Humanity's rise had been meteoric. From a single planetary civilization to a significant galactic player in less than 2 centuries, they had defied every predictive model developed by established species. The older civilizations watched with a mixture of fascination and barely concealed anxiety. Cross-referencing complete, the AI announced. A new set of holographic displays materialized, showing intricate networks of redacted information. Entire sections of galactic history appeared as blank spaces, carefully curated absences that spoke volumes. Elena's fingers danced across the quantum interface. Each touch sent ripples of computational energy through the system, probing the boundaries of what was known and what remained hidden. She had developed a unique approach to historical research, seeing the gaps as important as the information itself. The station's environmental systems adjusted imperceptibly. Outside the crystalline windows, the archival nebula shifted its luminescent patterns, as if sensing the potential of discovery. Quantum entanglement communication systems stood ready, capable of transmitting or isolating information at a moment's notice. Her current research focused on a period known simply as the silencing, a span of approximately 73 standard galactic years where records became frustratingly incomplete. Multiple advanced civilizations had seemingly gone quiet, their expansive communication networks falling silent without explanation. Something had happened, something significant, and Elena Rodriguez was going to find out exactly what that something was. The first data fragment began to take shape, promising revelations that would challenge everything the galaxy believed about humanity's place in the cosmic narrative. The Verdarian archives stretched before Elena like an infinite crystalline labyrinth, Quantum-stabilized data cores hummed with millennia of collected knowledge, each containing fragments of galactic history that most researchers never dared to explore. Thexanel moved beside her, his multi-jointed form casting prismatic reflections across the archival chamber. "You are treading where others have intentionally avoided," Thexanel murmured, his translator rendering his complex language into precise, standard galactic. His species had been galactic archivists for over 20,000 years, collecting and preserving information with a meticulousness that bordered on obsession. Elena's quantum translation algorithms worked silently, parsing through layers of encrypted data that most computational systems would have considered impossible to decode. Each fragment she uncovered seemed to raise more questions than answers. The patterns were deliberate, she realized, not random, intentionally obscured. The first significant breakthrough came unexpectedly. A series of communication logs from the Interstellar Diplomatic Archive, dated approximately 217 years earlier, began to reveal subtle inconsistencies. Standard first contact protocols had been followed, but something fundamental was missing. "Look," she said, highlighting a series of transmissions. "These initial contact reports from multiple species all follow an identical pattern, but the data compression is unusual, almost as if entire sections have been strategically removed." Thexanel's crystalline eyes shifted, reflecting complex emotional frequencies that human perception could barely comprehend. "Removal suggests intent," he responded carefully. "Not error, not accident." The archives around them seemed to pulse with an almost sentient awareness. Quantum-locked data cores shifted imperceptibly, as if responding to the probing of Elena's research. Advanced cooling systems maintained an ambient temperature that felt simultaneously too cold and too warm. Elena's neural interface began mapping the connections. Species after species had attempted initial contact with emerging human civilization. The Orion Confederacy, the Quantum Harmonics Collective, the Stellar Convergence Alliance. Each encounter followed a similar trajectory: initial observation, attempted communication, and then nothing. Not destruction, not conflict, simply absence. Her computational models began generating potential scenarios. Each simulation ran through thousands of potential interaction models, looking for consistent patterns. The results were frustratingly inconclusive, yet suggestive of something profound. "The human capacity for adaptation," Thexanel said softly, almost to himself, "is not something to be underestimated." A notification flickered across Elena's neural display. Her research grant had just received an anonymous additional funding allocation. The source was untraceable, which was itself a remarkable achievement in the age of quantum financial tracking. The additional resources allowed her to deploy more advanced analytical protocols. Quantum entanglement communication systems began parsing through layers of historical data that had previously been considered impenetrable. Each layer revealed more questions. Initial contact reports suggested that human civilization had been viewed as primitive, technologically nascent, easily categorized and potentially manageable. Yet something had fundamentally changed that narrative. "Every species has a story," Elena muttered, tracing complex algorithmic patterns across the holographic displays. "But humans? Humans seem to have multiple stories running simultaneously." Thexanel shifted, his form casting intricate shadows across the archival chamber. "Not all stories want to be told," he warned. "Some narratives protect themselves." The data fragments began to coalesce. Patterns emerged that defied conventional understanding. Communication logs showed increasingly complex interactions. Where most emerging species would demonstrate predictable response patterns, humans introduced variables that seemed almost impossible. Adaptive communication strategies, cognitive flexibility that challenged existing computational models, an ability to understand and reframe interactions that went beyond traditional diplomatic protocols. Something significant had happened during humanity's early interstellar interactions, something that had fundamentally altered how other species perceived them. And Elena Rodriguez was going to uncover exactly what that something was. The first piece of the puzzle was about to fall into place. The Crax Imperium archives arrived encrypted in a quantum-locked data package that defied conventional decryption methods. Most researchers would have spent years attempting to breach its security. Elena Rodriguez required less than 17 minutes. Texanal watched with a mixture of professional curiosity and growing apprehension. The Crax were legendary among galactic civilizations, a species known for their methodical approach to expansion and assimilation. Their historical records were typically comprehensive, almost obsessively detailed. These archives were different. The first layers of encryption fell away like delicate crystalline structures. Holographic displays populated Elena's research space, revealing communication logs that seemed to pulse with an almost living energy. Preliminary analysis suggested these were not standard archival records, but something far more complex. Initial transmissions painted a familiar picture. The Crax had identified Earth as a potential resource-rich developing civilization. Their approach was systematic, calculated. Preliminary reconnaissance suggested humans were technologically primitive, socially fragmented, and ripe for controlled integration. Standard expansion protocol. Exnal commented, his translator rendering a tone of professional detachment. The Crax approached approximately 278 standard galactic cycles ago. Their typical engagement model involved gradual cultural infiltration followed by economic integration. Elena's fingers danced across the quantum interface. Each touch revealed deeper layers of information. The communication logs began to change. Subtle at first, almost imperceptible shifts in communication tone and strategy. The Crax initial reports were clinical, precise, emotionless statistical analyses of human potential, paragraphs filled with computational projections, resource allocation models, and potential integration scenarios, standard imperial expansion documentation. But something changed. The transition was gradual, almost invisible to anyone not looking for it. The language of the reports began to shift. Mathematical precision gave way to something more complex. Uncertainty crept into the clinical language. Hesitation appeared in transmission protocols that had previously been absolute. Fascinating, Elena murmured. The later transmissions defied standard communication models. Fragments of psychological assessments began to appear, not just statistical evaluations, but nuanced observations that seemed to go beyond traditional imperial reconnaissance. The Crax were experiencing something unprecedented. Their own communication systems seemed to be transforming as they engaged with human data streams. Texanal leaned closer, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the holographic displays. "They are being understood," he said softly. The statement carried more weight than a simple observation. Elena isolated a critical transmission. Dated approximately 273 galactic cycles ago, it represented a turning point. The language had transformed completely. Where once there were cold statistical projections, now existed something that resembled confusion. Uncertainty. Almost fear. Not fear of military resistance. Not fear of technological conflict. Fear of comprehension. The Crax had approached humans believing they were conducting a standard expansion protocol. But something fundamental had changed in their approach. Their own communication systems seemed to be responding to human interaction in ways that defied existing computational models. They weren't just being analyzed, Elena whispered. They were being understood. Each subsequent transmission showed increasing complexity. The Crax communication networks began to display characteristics that suggested something profound was happening. Their own internal logic was being challenged, deconstructed, reframed. By whom? By what? The archives suggested that the Crax had not been conquered in any traditional sense. They had been comprehended so completely that their entire civilization began to destabilize from within. Texanal's translator rendered what might have been a sound of profound concern. "Some knowledge," he said, repeating a phrase from earlier, "is more dangerous than any weapon." Elena Rodriguez had found the first significant piece of the puzzle. And it was far more extraordinary than any invasion narrative could have suggested. The true story of humanity's emergence was just beginning to reveal itself. The quantum encrypted fragment arrived without warning. One moment, Alina's research interface was processing the crack's transmissions. The next, a data package materialized with such precision that it seemed to phase in and out of reality itself. Tazexanol recoiled involuntarily. "That's impossible," he muttered, his crystalline form shifting with a mixture of professional curiosity and genuine alarm. Traditional decryption methods would have taken centuries. Conventional quantum algorithms would have shattered against the fragment's impossible encryption. But Alina had developed something different, a unique approach that blended human cognitive flexibility with advanced computational theorems. Her custom algorithm was more than a decryption tool. It was an adaptive system that learned, transformed, and responded to encryption challenges in real time. Each attempt was not just a linear process, but a dynamic interaction. The research station's computational core hummed with increasing intensity. Quantum cooling systems worked overtime, managing the immense processing load. Holographic displays flickered, showing complex mathematical patterns that seemed to dance and breathe with a life of their own. 37 minutes into the decryption process, the first layers began to reveal themselves. What emerged was not just data. It was a profound insight into the nature of communication itself. Humans possessed an unprecedented ability to comprehend alien psychology, not through traditional linguistic translation or technological interfaces, but through a form of cognitive empathy that defied existing scientific understanding. The fragment revealed a terrifying truth. When other species attempted to understand humans, something extraordinary happened. The humans didn't just respond. They reflected. They understood the underlying psychological structures of the communicating species so completely that they could predict, navigate, and ultimately transform those very communication systems. "It's not about translation," Alina said softly, her fingers tracing the holographic data streams. "It's about total comprehension." Zexanol moved closer, his multiple sensory organs processing the information from different perceptual angles. "Comprehension implies more than understanding," he noted. "It suggests a form of complete cognitive integration." The data suggested that human interaction was fundamentally different from any known species in the galactic records. Where most civilizations approached communication as a transactional process, humans treated it as a living, adaptive system. Each communication was not just an exchange of information. It was a complete psychological mapping. A moment of profound empathy that went beyond language, beyond technology, beyond traditional understanding. The quantum fragment revealed communication logs that showed how humans could instantaneously understand the deepest psychological motivations of other species, not through invasive technologies, not through advanced scanning methods, but through a form of cognitive flexibility that seemed almost impossible. Alina's neural interface began generating complex simulation models. Each model showed how a human interaction could fundamentally alter the communication strategies of entire civilizations. It wasn't conquest. It wasn't invasion. It was understanding. The research station's artificial intelligence began generating warning protocols. The information was so profound, so potentially destabilizing, that standard archival security systems began to activate. "Some knowledge protects itself," Zexanol whispered, echoing an earlier observation. But Alina Rodriguez was not going to be deterred. The quantum fragment represented more than just a scientific breakthrough. It was a window into a fundamental truth about human potential. Civilizations could be transformed not through force, but through complete and total comprehension. The first truly revolutionary insight was taking shape. Humanity's greatest strength was not its technology, not its military potential, but its unprecedented capacity to understand, truly understand. The quantum fragment continued to pulse, waiting, revealing, challenging everything the galaxy thought it knew about communication, understanding, and the nature of intelligent interaction. The response was swift and calculated. Research funding evaporated overnight. Communication channels became restricted. Ancient species that had maintained diplomatic distance now displayed signs of genuine panic. Elena Rodriguez watched as the first wave of institutional pushback began. Her research grant, once celebrated, now became a target of intense scrutiny. Diplomatic channels that had previously been open now closed with surgical precision. Zexanil arrived with a holographic data package, his crystalline form casting intricate shadows across the research station's quantum-stabilized environment. "Information control protocols are activating," he said, his translator rendering a tone of professional understatement that barely concealed deep concern. The galactic communication networks began to shift, subtle at first, almost imperceptible. But Elena's advanced monitoring systems caught every nuanced change. Research databases began to compress. Archives became restricted. Entire sections of scientific communication went dark. Someone, or something, was attempting to suppress the emerging narrative about human cognitive capabilities. The first official communication came from the Galactic Research Consortium, a carefully worded directive that read more like a threat than an official communication. Research into specific historical periods was to be temporarily suspended. Funding would be redirected. Researchers were advised to pursue alternative lines of inquiry. Elena knew institutional language. This was not a suggestion. This was a command. But commands had never stopped her before. Zexanil presented the holographic data package. It was unlike any scientific document Elena had ever encountered. Layers of encryption protected information that seemed to pulse with a living energy. Each layer revealed more complexity, more depth. "Not all knowledge wants to be discovered," Zexanil murmured, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the holographic displays. The package contained fragments of communication logs from multiple advanced civilizations. Each log suggested a similar pattern. Initial contact with human communication systems, then a profound, inexplicable transformation. It wasn't just about information exchange. Something more fundamental was happening. Civilizations were experiencing a form of cognitive recalibration when they engaged with human communication networks. Their own internal communication structures began to change, adapt, transform. Elena's computational models worked overtime, parsing through the impossible data. Each simulation revealed more questions than answers. How could a communication system fundamentally alter the psychological infrastructure of entire civilizations? The research station's quantum-stabilized environment began to react. Cooling systems adjusted. Computational cores hummed with increased intensity. It was almost as if the technology itself understood the profound nature of the discovery. Diplomatic channels became increasingly restricted. Research databases compressed. Scientific communication networks began to show signs of unprecedented control mechanisms. But Elena Rodriguez was not going to be silenced. She had discovered something profound, something that challenged the fundamental understanding of communication, psychology, and interspecies interaction. Humans were not just another species in the galactic community. They were something entirely different. A civilization that could understand so completely that the act of understanding itself became a transformative force. Zexanil's translator rendered what might have been a sound of both admiration and concern. "Some knowledge," he repeated, "is more dangerous than any weapon." The galactic community was afraid, not of human military might, not of technological superiority. They were afraid of being truly, completely understood. And Elena Rodriguez was going to uncover exactly why. The Galactic Council Chamber was a marvel of architectural impossibility. Suspended in a quantum-stabilized void, it existed simultaneously in multiple dimensions. Representatives from thousands of advanced civilizations occupied seats that seemed to shift and breathe with living energy. Elena Rodriguez stood at the central platform, her presence both fragile and impossibly resilient. She carried with her the accumulated research that had taken 12 years to compile. Zexanil stood nearby, his crystalline form casting prismatic reflections across the chamber's impossible geometry. The hearing had begun with standard diplomatic protocols. Carefully worded statements, precise legal language designed to control information flow. But Alina was about to shatter those carefully constructed barriers. Her presentation began with a simple holographic display: communication logs, psychological analysis, comprehensive data that revealed a truth far more profound than anyone had anticipated. Humans were not just another species in the galactic community. They were something entirely different. Communication is not just an exchange of information, Alina explained, her voice cutting through the chamber's complex acoustics. It's a living system of complete understanding. The representatives from the oldest civilizations shifted uncomfortably. Quantum translators rendered her words with precise mathematical accuracy, but the underlying meaning carried something more profound. The holographic displays began to tell a story, not of conquest, not of technological superiority, but of an unprecedented capacity for total comprehension. When other species attempted to understand humans, something extraordinary happened. The humans didn't just respond. They reflected. They understood the underlying psychological structures of the communicating species so completely that they could predict, navigate, and ultimately transform those very communication systems. Representatives from the Quantum Harmonics Collective showed the first signs of genuine distress. Their communication interfaces began to fluctuate, displaying impossible patterns of uncertainty. Alina's research revealed a terrifying truth. Humanity's greatest strength was not its technology, not its military potential, but its unprecedented capacity to understand so completely that the act of understanding itself became a transformative force. Zexanil moved slightly, his multifaceted eyes capturing every nuanced reaction from the assembled representatives. The Verdarian had become more than a research partner. He was a witness to a moment that would reshape galactic understanding. The communication logs told a story of civilizations fundamentally altered by human interaction, not through force, not through invasion, but through a form of cognitive empathy that defied existing scientific understanding. We are not talking about translation, Alina continued, her voice gaining intensity. We are talking about complete psychological integration. The Galactic Council chamber seemed to hold its collective breath. Each representative saw something different in the presentation: fear, fascination, uncertainty. The oldest civilizations recognized a fundamental challenge to their existing understanding of interspecies communication. The quantum-stabilized environment began to react. Computational systems responded to the profound nature of the information being presented. It was almost as if the technology itself understood the revolutionary nature of the discovery. Alina Rodriguez was presenting more than research. She was revealing a fundamental truth about humanity's place in the galactic community. Civilizations could be transformed not through force, but through complete and total comprehension. The presentation reached its critical moment. The final piece of evidence that would challenge everything the galactic community thought it knew about communication, understanding, and the nature of intelligent interaction. The chamber fell silent. Thousands of representatives from advanced civilizations watched, listened, understood, and feared. The fallout from Alina Rodriguez's presentation spread across the galactic communication networks like a quantum wave of transformation. What had begun as a research project had become something far more significant, a fundamental challenge to established interspecies understanding. News of the presentation traveled faster than light, carried by quantum communication systems that seemed to vibrate with the profound implications of her research. Species that had existed for millennia found themselves re-examining every interaction they had ever had with humanity. Alina watched from her research station as the first waves of response began to manifest. Some civilizations responded with diplomatic isolation, others with intense scientific curiosity. A few displayed what could only be described as existential anxiety. Zexanil arrived with another holographic data package, his crystalline form casting intricate shadows across the quantum-stabilized environment. The galactic community is recalibrating, he said, his translator rendering a tone of profound understatement. Research institutions across multiple star systems began to reassess their historical archives. Diplomatic communication protocols that had existed for thousands of years suddenly appeared obsolete. The way civilizations understood communication was fundamentally changing. Alina's breakthrough was more than a scientific discovery. It was a revolutionary understanding of interspecies interaction. The Quantum Harmonics Collective was the first to make an official statement. Their communication was carefully crafted, revealing both fascination and deep concern. They described humanity's cognitive capabilities as a transformative communication matrix that challenged fundamental assumptions about intelligence and understanding. Other species began to compile their own historical interactions with humans. Each archive revealed similar patterns. Initial contact followed by a profound, inexplicable transformation of their own communication systems. It wasn't about technological superiority. It was about a form of understanding so complete that it became a form of interaction itself. Universities across multiple star systems began to develop new fields of study. Xenopsychological communication became a critical area of research. Scholars sought to understand how humanity could comprehend other species so completely that the act of understanding itself became transformative. Alina Rodriguez became both a celebrated and controversial figure. Some species demanded her silencing. Others saw her as a crucial bridge to understanding humanity's unique place in the universe. The research station received multiple diplomatic communication requests. Some were official. Many were carefully disguised. Each sought to understand the implications of her discovery. Vexenal helped Alina navigate the complex diplomatic landscape. The Verdarian had become more than a research partner. He was a witness to a moment that would reshape galactic understanding. Not all knowledge wants to be discovered, he would often remind her, a phrase that had become almost prophetic. The quantum-stabilized environment of the research station began to attract attention. Advanced civilizations sent discrete research teams. Each sought to understand the methodology behind Alina's groundbreaking research. But the true breakthrough was not in the technology. It was in the fundamental approach to understanding. Humanity had revealed itself as something entirely different, a civilization that could understand so completely that the act of understanding itself became a transformative force. Diplomatic channels began to shift. Communication networks started to adapt. The oldest civilizations in the galaxy found themselves reassessing everything they thought they knew about interspecies interaction. Alina Rodriguez had done more than present research. She had opened a window into a profound truth about communication, understanding, and the nature of intelligent interaction. The galaxy would never be the same. And somewhere, in the vast quantum networks that connected thousands of civilizations, a fundamental transformation was already beginning. Years passed. The initial shock of Alina Rodriguez's research gradually transformed into a new understanding of humanity's place in the galactic community. The quantum archives continued to reveal subtle, profound insights that challenged everything known about interspecies communication. Alina stood at the window of her research station, watching the archival nebula shift its luminescent patterns. Sexenal remained her closest companion, a bridge between her research and the broader galactic community. The note from the archives remained, a cryptic testament to the discovery. Some species are not conquered. They are understood, and in that understanding lies the most profound form of connection. Her research had revealed a fundamental truth that went beyond traditional concepts of diplomacy, conflict, or technological advancement. Humanity's greatest strength was not its ability to dominate, but its capacity to comprehend so completely that understanding itself became a transformative force. Diplomatic protocols across thousands of civilizations had been rewritten. Communication strategies evolved. The oldest species in the galaxy found themselves adapting to a new paradigm of interaction, one where complete understanding was the most powerful form of engagement. The Quantum Harmonics Collective had been the first to fully embrace the implications. Their communication networks now incorporated complex adaptive systems inspired by human cognitive models. Other civilizations followed, slowly at first, then with increasing enthusiasm. Alina's original research had been more than an academic exercise. It was a window into a profound truth about intelligence, communication, and the nature of understanding itself. Tuxinel approached, his crystalline form casting prismatic reflections across the station's quantum-stabilized environment. "The galaxy continues to change," he observed, his translator rendering a tone of both wonder and subtle concern. The research had revealed that humanity's interactions were never about conquest or domination. They were about connection. Complete, transformative connection that went beyond language, beyond technology, beyond traditional understanding. Civilizations that had once viewed humans as a potential threat now saw them as a critical bridge to a new form of interspecies communication. The oldest archives were re-examined. Historical interactions were reinterpreted through this new lens of understanding. Elena's work had become more than a scientific breakthrough. It was a philosophical revolution. The galactic community had learned a fundamental lesson. True communication was not about transmitting information. It was about creating a complete, empathetic connection that transformed both participants. Humans had not conquered other species. They had understood them so completely that the very act of understanding became a form of profound connection. Research institutions across multiple star systems continued to develop new fields of study. Xenopsychological communication became a critical area of scientific and diplomatic exploration. Scholars sought to understand the deeper implications of humanity's unique cognitive capabilities. The quantum archives continued to reveal new insights. Each discovery suggested that humanity's potential was far more profound than anyone had initially understood. "We are not just sharing information," Elena would often say during her lectures. "We are creating connections that transform both the communicator and the receiver." Tuxinel had become more than a research partner. He was a testament to the possibility of true understanding between different species. The research station remained a beacon of discovery, a place where the most profound insights about communication, understanding, and connection continued to emerge. The final piece of the puzzle was not about humanity's superiority. It was about humanity's unique capacity for empathy, for understanding, for creating connections that transcended traditional boundaries. As the archival nebula continued its eternal dance, Elena Rodriguez looked out at the vast expanse of the galaxy. She understood now that the true story of humanity was just beginning. A single archival note remained, a final testament to the discovery. In the vast complexity of the universe, true connection is the most powerful force of all. The galaxy would never be the same.